Hi guys, so welcome to the second Q&A on fat loss for CPP members before I give birth, because I do want to do all of this, as I said before, I do want to do all of this in a much more structured course and in a much more structured way for you. But in the meantime, I want to do one of these Q&As once a week just to help you figure out the big rocks around fat loss and answer some of the kind of burning questions. I posted last Sunday the first Q&A where I kind of covered a lot of the topics that I thought were most pertinent to you, and inevitably there were tons more questions in the comments below, which is awesome, which is great, which is exactly the kind of conversation I want to start. So I want to do the exact same thing this week. I'm going to cover 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different topics that have come up so far, and then we'll just continue the conversation. Any more questions come up from this, put them below, and I'll just do the exact same thing next week and create a video answering those questions. So I really hope this will help you guys. In the meantime, grab your headphones. These aren't going to be short videos. I'll try and keep it as concise as possible, but think of it as more of a podcast. Grab your headphones, go for a walk, and have a listen. Okay, so first thing that comes up, I'm just going to pull my table over here so that I don't have to hold the thing. First thing, and something that comes up all the time, I hate the idea of counting calories. So, so first of all, let's just address that. I hate the idea of counting calories. So how can I lose weight without counting calories? Like, I really don't want to count calories. And there's a phrase that I really love. You don't have to count calories, but calories always count. Okay, so it's really important for you to understand that at the end of the day, it's about energy balance. That's the biggest factor when it comes to fat loss, and obviously nutrition plays a role, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well. But at the end of the day, it's about calories in versus calories out. If you burn, let's go with 2,000 calories a day, you need to be in that calorie deficit. You need to be consuming fewer calories than that to be able to be losing fat. It's basic thermodynamics. Your body has a deficit of energy. It's burning more energy than is going in. So it has to create energy from somewhere, and it creates it from your fat stores. It can create it from your muscle. It can break down muscle as well. But like in general, like the aim at least, that's why we do strength training to maintain the muscle mass. That's another topic entirely. But the goal is to burn fat as a source of fuel in order to reduce body fat that we are carrying. So you have to be in that calorie deficit. Now, that doesn't mean you have to count calories. I always think, though, that I've gone back and forth on this over the years, and you can absolutely create a calorie deficit without counting calories. You can follow a diet. Like all diets, if they work because they get you into a calorie deficit, right? So if you do something like low carb or keto, you're basically cutting out all of this like highly palatable food and all of the carbohydrates, and that gets you into a calorie deficit, and it also helps with hunger satiation and things like that. Even people who do suddenly like no sugar, no gluten, it's because they've taken a bunch of foods out of their diet and now they're left with a calorie deficit. There are also tons of people who do this kind of thing and they don't actually lose weight, and it's because they cut those things out, but then they've still not got themselves into a calorie deficit. The same with like clean eating. You cut out all of the junk, and normally when people are left doing something like paleo or Whole30 or some other kind of clean diet, they're left in a calorie deficit. And often not. There are a lot of people that these things don't work for. And it's not that I have a problem with doing these different types of diet. It's just that when people follow these very strict diet plans, they're not understanding the mechanism by which they're actually losing weight. They think that it's because they've cut out the carbs or because they've cut out processed foods or whatever. So that's why I'm always going on about a calorie deficit, because I see so many women who are like, Jen, I eat so healthily and I can't lose weight. And I'm like, cool, because you're eating, say, 2,000 calories, which is what you're burning, of really healthy food, but you're not in a calorie deficit. Eating healthy food in and of itself is not gonna help you lose fat. And this is a really important thing to get in your brains. You have to be in a calorie deficit, and you can compare it to saving money. If you want to save money, right, over the course of a year, you have to be earning more than you're spending, right? And you can do that just by guessing or just by doing it by accident. But, sorry, I've got a really itchy nose. For those of you who are watching and thinking, why does she keep scratching her nose? For those, like, you can accidentally fall into like that, but ideally you want to kind of like have a bit of a budget and figure out what you're spending and figure out what you're earning and know what's going in, at least know what's going in so that you know how much you can have going out and how much you need to put aside each month. So looking at the numbers can help you consistently save money. And it's the same with losing weight, as when you look at calories, you can get a really clear picture of, here's exactly what I need and this is how much I need to maintain my weight. If I eat more than this, I'm going to be gaining weight, and if I do less than this, I'm going to be losing weight. So what I have most of my clients do is I try to get them to spend at least 2 weeks counting calories, because they learn, even if they decide it's not for them, which I totally get, it's totally fine if you decide it's not for you. But what often happens is that they say, wow, this is amazing, it's really working, and I really understand now what I was eating before and what I was doing before, and now I understand what I need to do to lose weight. That after that 2 week period, then they can say, okay, so now, like, First of all, they might say, okay, now I'm just going to try and figure it out on my own now that I have more awareness, and that's totally fine. Sometimes what happens with those people is then they stop losing weight because they're no longer really getting on top of the number of calories that are going in and out. But some of them do manage to lose some weight over time. What I try to do with most of my clients is help them automate the process. And I have a whole process that I can go into. I think it needs to be a separate video, but I try to help them set meal time, so breakfast, lunch and dinner, for example, with a snack in the middle, and 3 or 4 meals that they count all the calories and they count the protein that's in it. They know exactly what the portion sizes are, and then they rotate those 3 or 4 meals at that meal time, at breakfast, at lunch and then at dinner. And then they know, okay, this is a 450 calorie meal, this is a 550 calorie meal, this is a 300 calorie snack. They know what's in it. They don't have to count it every single time. And you can automate the process so that you pick one of your 4 breakfasts, you pick one of your 4 lunches, you pick one of your 4 snacks, and you pick one of your 8 dinners, like whatever it is. And that way you can automate it, but you're also, without actually counting calories manually every single time, you know that you're in a calorie deficit, at least for a while. Sometimes you have to kind of check back in with that, but that can get you moving in the right direction and get you losing fat quite well for quite a long time without actually tracking. But for those of you who want to like never track and never look at what you're eating, normally what you need to do is end up following some kind of strict faddy diet that gives you, like, that gets you in a calorie deficit somehow by some arbitrary rule, which I don't think is preferable. I think it's very hard to just stumble into a calorie deficit, because like, we don't want to, we're not used, it's a habit to eat more food, and our bodies don't want us to be in a calorie deficit. It's very hard to be in a calorie deficit by accident. So I really encourage people to spend some time learning about calories and tracking calories and learning about energy balance, even if they don't do it long term. Okay, so that's what I say to people who hate counting calories. And also, I know some people will sort of say, what if you have an eating disorder or you have a history of eating disorders? Like, this is unhealthy or like whatever. I get it. I have a history of eating disorders too. I struggled with it a lot throughout my teens, so I really, really get that. But for me, when I learned about the numbers and I learned about the cold, hard facts, and it demystified it all for me, like a lot of my fear around food and my weird eating habits and my binging and all of that stuff kind of just went away on its own because food wasn't so scary anymore. So that's a big part of what I try to do, is try to make all of this seem less scary and less of a mystery. Okay, let's move on, because I think I've overlabored that point and we're 11 minutes already. Okay, so the same person asked, well, what about properties of food other than calories? Okay, so if we want to talk about properties of food other than calories, I'll try and keep this short. We're either going to be talking about one of a couple of things, like either the macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbs, or the micronutrients, so vitamins and minerals, right? It might also be the water content, the fiber content. It might be also if it contains a certain thing like gluten or things like that. Sorry, pregnancy. And what I want to say on this point is that, of course, these things matter, right? Nobody's saying these things don't matter. But sometimes I think a lot of like the kind of health and wellness stuff now is all focused on food quality and not focused at all on basic energy balance and the caloric value in foods, okay? Because calories are just a unit of measurement of energy, right? And they're both important. And people who, a lot of the time, there's this false dichotomy created online of like either food quality or calories, and they both matter. They both matter. So eating, like, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a bit, but like there aren't certain properties of food, like I know it's very popular, like carbs make you fat, or sugar makes you fat, or gluten causes inflammation, or dairy, or whatever. But there's nothing really to back any of these things up. When you have a balanced diet and you have a calorie controlled diet, you can achieve whatever aesthetic or health goals you want. You can increase body fat, you can decrease body fat, you can maintain body fat, you can build muscle with the right training. Like, it's not about these properties of food and these magical properties of food that other people are. I know you're seeing a lot of this stuff online, and it's not about those properties of food. That's not what's going to help you lose weight, okay? We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. So the same person said, well, for example, wheat. I know that whenever I eat wheat, I'm obsessed with eating more. And I think that that's on some physiological or chemical level because I'm normally quite disciplined. And I think that there's no mechanism by which eating wheat can then cause you to eat more wheat. Some people have genuine intolerances or allergies to certain foods like wheat or dairy or peanuts or eggs or fish. You know, there are genuine intolerances or allergies to those things, but most people are not intolerant or allergic. And most of the time, I've worked with a lot of women who have this thing that like, well, I can't eat gluten. Gluten makes me bloated, or gluten makes me then just need more, or like I'm addicted to sugar. And often it's just because we've been told these things so many times that these things are bad for us, that we shouldn't eat them, that then the smallest little thing causes us to kind of go into a bit of an all or nothing mode. We get this very dichotomous thinking. And there's this nocebo effect. So a placebo effect is when you believe that something's good for you, and so it has a psychological effect on you. And a nocebo effect is when you're told constantly, this is bad for you, this is bad for you, this is bad for you, and then you eat it and it makes you feel bad because you believe it's bad for you, but not because of any actual compounds in the foods. So I'm not saying any specific individual doesn't have an intolerance to wheat, for example, but most people don't, and most people just have this negative connotation with wheat or with gluten or with sugar, and it causes them to spiral. And actually the solution is to undo those negative connotations around those specific types of food and learn that those foods, and maybe it's looking at the research, maybe it's like learning more evidence-based stuff, but learning that those foods are not actually bad for you, because the mental gymnastics that you're doing is way worse for you than the food actually is. You need to really be able to discern if you actually have an intolerance or if you don't have an intolerance. And obviously another solution, because it's up to you what you do with your body. So one solution is fixing that connotation that you have in your brain, and another possible solution is to cut that food out, and that's your prerogative. If you don't want to eat that type of food, you can cut it out. But what I tend to find is that people go into this all or nothing thinking. They cut out gluten or wheat, and then they don't eat it, let's say for 4 days or for 2 weeks or for 2 months. And then one day there's this really amazing cake at a birthday party, they're really hungry, they eat a slice, and instead of just being like, okay, I just had a 200-calorie slice of cake and I'm gonna move on with my life now, and I'm gonna fit it into my calories or not fit it into my calories, but it's no big deal. They then spiral, and they've gone from all, and then they go into the nothing space of like, okay, well now it's fucked. I might as well just eat whatever I want. And a great analogy that I've seen is that it's like having a flat tire, and instead of fixing that tire, it's like slashing the other 3 tires, right? You can literally just leave it at that and then get back on track, or you can just then spiral and just everything's lost. And I think that's what a lot of people do in their heads when they have this thing that like, this is bad, this is a bad food. And so I'm always trying to encourage people, like you don't have to eat gluten if you don't want to, you don't have to eat wheat, you don't have to eat sugar if you don't want to eat it. But I'm here to tell you that objectively speaking, these things are not bad for you. And I'd really love you to learn that they're not bad for you, so that you have the choice to eat them or not eat them, but without them having a negative effect on your consciousness. So I hope that helps. Obviously we can discuss this more. And then, okay, really good question. Clean food versus like the processed food. From a purely fat loss perspective, let's say same amount of calories, you've got a clean diet, 2,000 calories, or let's say the person needs 2,000 calories a day to maintain their weight, right? So we put them on a diet of 1,800 calories. Or we have 2 different people, and one person is on this really clean diet and, you know, lots of fiber, all the protein, the macronutrients that they need, all balanced, really nutritious whole food, and the other person is eating just pure processed junk, right? So let's create this false dichotomy, because we're never actually talking about that. From a purely fat loss perspective, 1,800 calories is 1,800 calories. It's like a kilometer is a measurement of distance. It doesn't matter if it's over a mountain, over a desert, over a straight road. It's still 1 kilometer, but they're different types of terrains, or uphill, downhill, right? Different types of terrains. So you could use this to compare, the calorie content is still the same, but the nutrient content is different, right? And of course there are going to be differences. There's first of all going to be differences in the person's health. Like, you're going to be far healthier with the unprocessed food than with the junk. They're going to feel much fuller. They're going to have much more energy. The processed stuff is probably much more calorie dense, and so they get smaller quantities of food, so they may not feel as satisfied from their food. If it's not very high in nutrient quality or in fiber, it's probably going to mess up their digestion. But also, another thing that's interesting is that we have something called the thermic effect of food, and that's how many calories we burn through digestion. So digestion is an active process and it burns calories, and it's usually about 10% of the calories that we consume. So if I eat 2,000 calories a day, about 200 calories a day are spent on the thermic effect of food, are spent on digestion. So foods that are higher in protein and higher in fiber, food, like whole foods, unprocessed foods, are harder for us to digest. And so we burn more calories through the thermic effect of food than if we just eat really highly palatable like junk that some of the processes have already happened. It's not going to be a huge amount every day. Like it might be 10 calories a day or 50 calories a day. Like I don't know what the numbers are. And it might be very, very little, but it does cause you to burn a little bit more calories as opposed to the processed food. So your calories out actually become, like the calories in are still the same, but the calories out are increased. Okay, so everything is affecting calories in versus calories out all the time from a purely energy balance, thermodynamics, fat loss perspective. It's going to be different, right? But of course, the healthier diet is going to be better for somebody who's trying to lose weight, but in many indirect ways, they're going to burn slightly more calories through, okay, one direct way is that they're going to burn slightly more calories through digestion. And then in indirect ways, they're going to feel fuller for longer. They're going to have more energy. They're going to have better digestion. Like there's going to be a lot of indirect ways that supports their fat loss journey and helps them burn more calories or, you know, not get big cravings afterwards or not still feel hungry. It's going to make it easier for them to adhere to the diet. However, the one thing I want to say about this is it doesn't have to be either or. This is a very dichotomous way of thinking. And I'm a really big fan of the 80-20 approach. So you, of course, want to make sure you're getting healthy foods. You want to do that because it will support your fat loss efforts, but also because it's just healthy for you to do. But 80%, if 80% of your diet comes from healthy whole foods, then the other 20%, the other 10-20%, you can play with it. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect food. You can still play with that other 20% and you can have a bit of what you enjoy, have a bit of processed foods. You can fit that into your calorie total every day and enjoy the foods that you want to eat without the guilt, without it affecting your health negatively. Obviously, if you eat the junk all the time, that's not good for your health. But it can be part of a balanced diet and it can be part of a calorie deficit. I think I've well and truly labored that point, so I'm going to move on to the next one. I'm going to keep this short on the topic of hormones and birth control. Is a calorie deficit realistic? Honestly, hormones in terms of birth control is not one of the topics that I feel most confident with. It's not one of the topics that I've spent a lot of time learning about or really looking into. And also I think I think there's a lot of pseudoscience out there and a lot of people who will tell you with 100% certainty that they know certain things. But also I think women have very, very, very different reactions to birth control, to hormonal birth control, to all sorts of birth control. I personally haven't used any hormonal birth control for over a decade. I've used an IUD and never had any problems with that, so I don't have any personal experience with it. I mean, I did when I was like 17 to 20, but like I was so hormonal then anyway that like I have no idea how to differentiate that. I'll look into it because I can't give you a definitive answer and I don't want to say anything that's not true. But I do think what I understand of it is that taking into account, putting aside individual differences, like it shouldn't be a massive, there shouldn't be any reason why it should stop you from losing weight or why it should stop you from being in a calorie deficit. If you burn 2,000 calories a day, you need to be eating 1,800 calories a day. You need to figure out a way of doing that consistently over time. And there's no reason why that's not realistic with birth control. I can imagine if you think about mechanisms, like it could be that it causes some women to hold on to fat, it makes it more stubborn, like harder to get rid of, or it could increase your appetite and thereby increasing your calorie intake. But beyond that, I don't know how real those threats are or how consistent those threats are. That may happen for some women and not for others. But basically what I'm saying is I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think that birth control, hormonal birth control, needs to get in the way of your your aesthetic goals, your fat loss goals. I don't think it's a thing that really you need to take into account. But I don't completely know, so I will look into it more and I'll get back to you on that. And finally, last thing, some tips on how to structure your day. More calories in the evening versus in the morning or vice versa, or if breakfast needs to be large or small. The person who asked this question actually said, I think you're going to tell me that it's individual, and yeah, you kind of know me well, but let's just dig into it a little bit more. I know there's a lot of noise about meal timings and nutrient timings, and like, do you need to eat 1,000, do you need to eat bigger, you need to eat a bigger breakfast, or you need to eat at certain times a day, or don't eat after 5 p.m, or only a light lunch or a light dinner, that it will be turned into fat if you have carbs in the evening and things like that. None of this, all of this is kind of an example of focusing on the minutiae. It doesn't matter, right? There are diet protocols whereby you eat 6 small meals a day. As long as you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight. There are others where it's just 3 bigger meals a day. If you're in a calorie deficit, you'll lose weight. And there's some diet protocols that, like the warrior diet, where you it's basically an extreme form of intermittent fasting where you have a 4-hour feeding window and you fast for 20 hours a day. And so they have a massive feast before going to bed in the evening, and then they fast for 20 hours and do the same thing every single evening. And people lose weight on it because they're in a calorie deficit. So really, none of this matters. Really, none of it matters. And this may change throughout your life. And I would say the thing that really matters is to find what works for you and just automate. So for the longest time, before I had a child, I used to be used to fall into intermittent fasting a little bit, like by accident. I didn't like having breakfast, and I wouldn't eat for that first bit of the day, but I needed a really big meal to be able to sleep in the evening. And I was very, very slim. I had very little body fat. And that's changed since becoming a mum. I have breakfast, but I don't have it when I wake up. I have to eat 3 solid meals a day, and I need a really good meal before I go to bed. And I've worked with people, and I know people who need to have a really big breakfast, and they need to eat light at dinner, or they can't fall asleep. It really doesn't matter, and it's really not even about your metabolism or anything like that. It's about your preference, because if you eat to your preferences, you are going to adhere to it for a longer period of time. I've seen so many people try to fit a round peg into a square hole, and well, everyone says you have to eat breakfast, and breakfast needs to be this really big ordeal, and I hate eating breakfast. It doesn't fit into my schedule. It's well, that's going to be impossible to maintain in the long term, so it doesn't make any sense to do that. So So it's really important to find what works for you and do that consistently. Personally, I find I have a pretty light, I have a big shake for breakfast, lots and lots of fruit and things like that. Lunch is quite light for me, otherwise I get really sleepy in the afternoon and I have a heavier dinner. That works really well for me, and when I eat like that, I feel good and I find it really easy to stick to. If I try to switch it around, I end up not being able to get to sleep because I'm hungry. I feel sluggish during the day because because I don't like having big meals during the day. And so it doesn't, and I've tried doing that. I tried doing that for the longest time because everyone says, you know, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And when I switched it around, it was like amazing for me. So it's really important for you to figure out what you need. You don't like eating breakfast, so don't eat breakfast. It may change over time and over your fat loss journey as well. But these the focus on nutrient timing and when to eat and how much to eat is like, is focusing on the minutia and not focusing on the big rocks. If you're so focused on what time you're eating and what you're eating and how much you're eating at those different times of day and trying to do something that doesn't work for you, but you're not counting calories, you're not looking at calories, you're not getting calories in check, you are wasting your time on the minutia. You need to figure that out first. You need to figure out how many calories you need, first of all, and then you need to figure out what feeding patterns work for you and you can maintain over the long term, and it doesn't feel like a struggle, it doesn't feel difficult. There's absolutely no advantage to eating at different times of the day. It's just about your preference and what you can adhere to. Remember, adherence is the biggest factor. Being able to do something consistently over a long period of time is what is going to make the difference. If you can't do it consistently, if you cut out gluten and sugar and you can't do that for more than 2 weeks, you're not going to lose any meaningful weight. You're not going to make any meaningful changes to your lifestyle. If you force yourself to eat a big breakfast and you hate eating a big breakfast and you feel like crap afterwards, you're not going to be able to adhere to this. You try not to eat in the evening and then you end up binging because you really need to have a proper dinner. This is not going to help you lose weight. You have to find what suits you. And it's not about individual differences of like metabolism or body type or anything like that. It's about your preference. So forget all of that stuff. Stop focusing on the minutia and focus on the really big rocks that are really going to make a meaningful change in your body composition. That was a long one. I'm over 30 minutes. I'm going to finish this video now, and please let me know in the comments below any other questions that you have, but also, do you want me to break these videos down? I've covered 5-6 topics here. I could make shorter 10-minute videos on these different topics if you prefer. Whatever works for you. Let me know. Cool. Well done for making it this far.